Think your love life is rough? Ghosted on Tinder? Left on red? Please, try surviving medieval marriage. Back then, your parents could literally sell you off before you learned to spell your own name, your wedding night came with a live studio audience, and every pregnancy was basically a game of Russian roulette. Welcome to the only era in history where "till death do us part" was less a promise and more a deadline. So here's the deal. You might think surviving medieval marriage was all knights in shining armor and fairy tale castles. But the reality looked more like a horror comedy with zero chance of a happy ending. You know how today people complain about awkward first dates? In the Middle Ages, awkward meant being marched into a bedroom while half your village cheered you on, then being told to smile while the priest blessed your bedsheets. And divorce? Forget it. The closest you'd get was a miracle plague wiping out your spouse. This isn't just a history lesson, it's a survival test you'd almost certainly fail, because medieval marriage wasn't about love, romance, or compatibility. It was about politics, property, and producing heirs until your body gave out. Your family didn't swipe right, they bartered you off like livestock, your personal happiness, not even on the priority list. By the end of this, you'll realize why modern dating apps, yes, even the ones full of catfish, cryptic bios, and unsolicited gym selfies, are paradise compared to what people endured in the so-called good old days. Spoiler alert, you wouldn't have survived medieval marriage, and after hearing what it involved, you'll be glad you didn't have to try. Let's meet Margaret Beaufort, the medieval poster child for why you definitely wouldn't survive marriage in the Middle Ages. At the age of 6, yes, 6, still in single digits, Margaret was married off in what basically amounted to a medieval real estate deal. She had no idea what was happening. She was probably more interested in playing with dolls than in signing marriage contracts. But her guardians knew exactly what they were doing, locking down her enormous inheritance before politics could shift and snatch it away. 3 years later, shift it did. Her first marriage was annulled like it never happened, and Margaret was promptly resold to Edmund Tudor. She was 12, he was 24, and while there was an unspoken rule back then that you should wait until the bride hit 14 before making things official, Edmund apparently missed that memo. Within months of their wedding, Margaret was pregnant, a child forced to have a child. The sheer brutality of this is hard to wrap your head around. While you're stressing about prom dates or bad Tinder matches at 12, Margaret was facing down pregnancy and all the medical care medieval Europe had to offer, which was about as advanced as home remedies written on the back of a napkin. Her story wasn't just unusual, it was terrifyingly common among wealthy families desperate to cash in their daughters like lottery tickets. If you thought being grounded at 12 was bad, imagine being grounded straight into marriage. Welcome to medieval child marriage, where your future was decided before you even had a say in what your favorite color was. For wealthy families, daughters weren't raised, they were traded. Your value wasn't based on charm or personality but on how much land, wealth, or titles came attached to your name. To your parents, you weren't their precious little girl, you were a high-stakes lottery ticket they needed to cash in before war, plague, or political chaos wiped out the jackpot. Take Isabella of Valois, daughter of the King of France. In 1396, she was married to King Richard II of England. Her wedding gifts included not just fancy jewels but her dolls and miniature silver furniture for them. Yes, a bride still young enough to play house was sent to rule one. The marriage contract even spelt out that consummation had to wait until she turned 12. How thoughtful. Here's the kicker. While child marriages sound like the norm, they weren't as widespread as we imagine. Most peasants and middle-class folks married in their late teens or early 20s. The horror of childhood marriage was mostly reserved for the wealthy elite, because when you had too much power to gamble with, you gambled your kids instead. And for those unlucky enough to be born into noble bloodlines, innocence had an expiration date stamped on it before puberty. So, you've survived being married off as a child? Congratulations. Now it's time for the big day, or should we say, the big night. Modern couples might stress over a clumsy first dance or whether the DJ remembered their playlist. In medieval Europe, the real embarrassment came after the party, when half your guests marched you straight into the bedroom. Here's how it worked. Once the feasting was over, the bride was escorted by the women, stripped, combed, and tucked into bed like an unwilling doll. Meanwhile, the groom was prepped by the men with what we'll politely call pep talks. Then came the parade. The groom was led in. Priests blessed the bedsheets for fertility and, wait for it, bridesmaids and groomsmen would throw stockings at the couple. If they hit you, that meant they'd be next to marry. Imagine medieval dodgeball. Only the prize was lifelong responsibility and possible death in childbirth. Survive the wedding night? Congrats! You've unlocked Level 2, childbirth, also known as medieval Russian roulette. Every pregnancy carries odds worse than extreme sports. Roughly 1 in 3 women died during labor or soon after. Medical help included bloodletting, yes, let's drain more blood from a woman in labor, and birthing chairs that looked like torture devices. Margaret Beaufort nearly died at 13, giving birth. Her body is permanently damaged. For noble women, pregnancy wasn't occasional, it was a full-time job. Baby after baby until menopause or death, whichever came first. Romance? Forget it. Medieval marriage meant your womb was your contract, so you've survived child marriage, public humiliation, and childbirth. What's next? Living with a spouse who legally owns you. Under medieval law, a wife had no separate identity. Your property, your voice in court, even your freedom, all belonged to your husband. He could beat you, lock you away, or worse, and the law called it reasonable chastisement. Henry VIII took it further. When his wives failed to produce male heirs, he simply executed them. Forget Netflix fights over what to watch. In medieval marriage, the wrong answer could literally cost you your head. Love? Optional? Obedience? Mandatory. Now, before you start imagining every medieval villager marrying off their child like a bizarre episode of Game of Thrones, here's the reality check. Most people didn't live this nightmare. The extreme stories like child brides, public wedding nights, and execution-happy husbands were mostly the problems of the elite. Wealthy families treated daughters like chess pieces in a political game. But peasants and ordinary townsfolk, they usually married later, often in their late teens or early 20s, when they could afford to set up a household. That said, normal didn't mean easy. Even common marriages faced brutal odds. Childbirth was still dangerous, laws still favored men, and life expectancy was short. But the ordinary folks at least had more say in their matches, and their wedding nights were a lot more private than the royal circus versions. So, while it's tempting to think all of medieval Europe was one long nightmare wedding season, if one story sums up why you wouldn't survive medieval marriage, it's Margaret Beaufort's. At just 12, she was married to a man twice her age, and within months, she was pregnant. By 13, she went into labor during the dead of winter. Her confessor wrote it was a miracle that such a small, underdeveloped girl could deliver a child at all. The birth nearly killed her and left her permanently unable to have more children. One pregnancy, just one, stole her health for life. And remember, Margaret was lucky. She survived. Many girls her age didn't. Childbirth in the Middle Ages was less a blessing and more a death sentence, no matter your rank. For noble women, though there was no escape, your worth was measured by how many heirs you could produce, even if it destroyed you. If you think dating apps are brutal, try surviving that job description.